Welcome to your daily dose of sci-fi adventures. New stories dropped every single day. Smash that subscribe button and ring the to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and unlock even more epic cosmic tales. Dr. Maren Solari's heart thrummed in her chest like a startled creature as the shuttle pierced the crimson haze of Zyron 9's atmosphere. Through the thick, domed viewport, she watched the world below, an endless sea of jagged rock spires. The land bathed in an otherworldly red glow. Electric storm clouds churned on the horizon, jagged streaks of indigo lightning flickering against the ochre sky. The planet's beauty was lethal. Even from orbit, she could feel its malevolence. Pressing in, approaching LZ-7, intoned Captain Reyes from the pilot's seat. His voice was steady, but Maren caught the slight tremor in his tone. He'd flown through asteroid belts and viral storms, but nothing tested his nerves like Zyron 9. Maren exhaled slowly. She'd studied Zyron 9 for years, the atmospheric composition, the seismic tremors, the ecosystem models, but nothing prepared her for the visceral reality of it. The planet was alive, and it had teeth. The landing zone lay nestled between two colossal, wine-sculpted butts. Once the shuttle's skids touched ground, the hull shuddered under the impact, dust pluming outward like a rising tide of rust. The ramp lowered with a groan, and the sulfur-tinged air rushed in, thick and metallic on her tongue. She stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the ashen soil. Her sensors beeped in consternation as they searched for biosigns: temperature, spikes, movement patterns, anything. Their readings flickered between near zero and dangerously high. Maren tapped her wrist console. Atmospheric composition nominal but high in ionic particulates. Visibility poor beyond 200 meters. Behind her, the rest of the survey team assembled. Lieutenant Zhao, scanning the horizon with a long-range optical array. Dr. Harrell, already kneeling to take soil samples. Corporal Dunn, rifling through crates of pulse rifles and tethered nets. And at the rear, Kale stood apart, silent. His frame was lean but athletic, dressed in muted gray field armor with no insignia. Beneath the helmet's visor, his eyes an unnatural shade of storm cloud gray tracked every movement. Maren felt a tickle of unease whenever she watched him. He was her guide, yet she knew nothing of his past beyond sparse mission files stamped top secret. "All right," Captain Reyes called. "Maren, I want preliminary scans of the canyon. Zhang and Dunn, set up perimeter defenses, motion mines, and signal jammers. Harold, don't touch anything edible. Kale, stay close to Dr. Solari." Kale inclined his head. Maren wondered if he registered orders at all. He seemed to live on some other plane of awareness. They trekked toward the gaping maw of Belurian Canyon. The landscape fractured into jagged spires and razor-thin ridges. The wind sighed through the crevices like a wounded animal. Maren's boots kicked up fine red dust that clung to every exposed surface, glittering under the dim light of the planet's twin suns. "Command estimates the apex predator here, code-named Leviathan Hukal, weighs over 100 metric tons." Harold rattled off as she scribbled in her datapad. "Bioluminescent spines, crystalline carapace, rumored to chew through durasteel plating. Officially, no footage exists. Rumors only, rumors of entire landers stolen," Zhao added. Scanning through a holoprojector, they vanish without a trace. No survivors recovered. Maren swallowed. "And now we're the first expedition to gather real data. Keep your eyes open and rifles charged." They advanced in single file, weapons at the ready. Maren's pulse darts, engineered to sedate creatures twice as large as a slipehound, hung in a harness at her hip, untouched by her fingers. This was biological fieldwork on the brink of madness. The air around them rippled. Maren halted. Her sensors screamed as spike heat signatures converging on a single point ahead. She peered through her vision filter, adjusting for the dust. A shadow flitted between crags, colossal and lithe. "Something's moving," she whispered. Zhao leveled his rifle and squeezed the trigger. A soft thump, then silence. "False alarm," he muttered, scanning again. But Maren's throat tightened. The heat signature remained. Kale walked ahead, unarmed. Maren called out, "Kale, stay back." He turned, expression unreadable. "I need a closer look." Negative. Before she could finish, he sprinted into the dust wall, vanishing from view. Marin's breath caught in her throat as she and the others followed. They emerged in a vast amphitheater of rock. The canyon floor dipped away into swirling red mists. Marin's comm crackled. "Base, this is Solari. We have movement possible. Predator sighting requesting backup, static. Then, proceed with caution. Extraction ETA 56 minutes. The time echoing in her ear sounded too long. She crouched, scanning the ground. Tracks massive, triangular, three-pronged claws. The width of a small car. The prints intersected, overlapped, leading toward a chasm. Dunn read the tracks. Footprint depth suggests weight over 100 tons. Barely sank. A low growl vibrated through the rocks. Every hair on Marin's body stood on end. She fumbled to record the frequency, to capture the sound signature, but her fingers shook. "Stay." Together, she urged. "We're not alone." They moved forward in a tight semicircle, weapons raised. Kale positioned himself at the apex, as if instinctually forming the point of a defensive wedge. Suddenly, the ground shook. A boulder the size of a truck spun off a ledge and crashed near them, sending out a shockwave. Marin was propelled backward, the world spinning. She hit the ground, ears ringing. Through the swirling dust, she glimpsed him. He stood at the canyon's edge, a silhouette against the glowing red sky, slender yet towering over 8 meters tall, every inch rippling with muscle. Along its spine, rows of bioluminescent spines pulsed with an icy blue light. The carapace gleamed like cracked obsidian, its head lifted, an angular maw opening, to reveal teeth like giant razors. Marin's breath caught. The Leviathan Hukal surveyed them, nostrils flaring as it inhaled the metallic tang of their fear. A rumble like distant thunder rolled through its chest. It exhaled, and the dust whipped around it in a transient whirlwind. Symmetry shattered as it launched itself toward the group. Kale sprang up, charging to intercept. Marin scrambled for her dart gun, useless at this range. Time dilated. She watched, paralyzed, as Kale closed the distance in 3 long strides. The beast's claw sliced the air. She felt the rush of displaced wind. Kale slid beneath the swipe, rolling into the dust and springing back onto his feet directly in front of the predator's chest. Marin's mind screamed, "He's a human, he can't survive this." But Kale stood unflinching, fists clenched. The Leviathan reared, jaws snapping. Kel's muscles bulged. The armor plating on his forearms glowed faintly before lancing into brilliant arcs of energy. Marin blinked. In the flash, Kel's arm connected with the beast's chest. A resounding crack echoed, louder than a pulse rifle discharge. The Leviathan roared, stumbling backward, spines dimming. Marin tore her eyes away, fumbling for the comm. "This is Dr. Solari. Unbelievable, hostile engaged. Request immediate evac." But as she gestured, she noticed the other team members frozen, horrified. In that instant, Marin realized they were witnessing not a fight, but a transformation. Their guide, this mysterious, guarded man, was something else entirely. The Leviathan swayed, trying to regain balance. Kale advanced, not with the soldiers' precision, but with the cold inevitability of a predator. Marin squeezed her eyes shut, unwilling to watch when she dared to open them again. The Leviathan's bulk shuddered and fell with a ground-splitting crash. Dust billowed, obscuring the fallen titan. Kale emerged, chest heaving, armor scorched, hands dripping with blood and ichor. The pulse mines Dunn had set were disarmed. The other explorers stood in stunned silence. Marin sank to her knees, hand pressed to her quivering mouth. Her recorder lay forgotten on the ground. All around her, Zyron 9's red mist swirled, carrying the dying echoes of the planet's greatest hunt. She stared at Kale, half-human, half-weapon, and her scientific mind fractured. The mission report she would write could never capture this, the moment she first watched a human rip an apex predator in two. The dust settled in slow, choking eddies as Marin scrambled to her feet, legs unsteady beneath her. Around her, the canyon's echoing silence rang louder than any roar of the fallen Leviathan Hukal. The massive carcass lay splayed across. The red sands, crystalline spines dimmed, mouth agape in a final, silent scream. Blood thick, black as oil pooled around its shattered skull, seeping into the soil like living ink. Zhao knelt at the beast's flank, eyes wide behind his visor. Harold hovered beside him, datapad in hand, fingers trembling as she downloaded thermal and structural readings. Dunn stood back, rifle slack at her side, scanning the cliffs as if expecting another monster to drop from the sky. Marin's gaze locked on Kale. He stood at the center of this carnage, chest heaving, his forearm armor scorched but intact. Red ichor dripped from his gauntlet, strands of nanite slick crimson that glistened like veins of obsidian. He looked almost serene, as though he'd merely stepped from a bath rather than erupted from within a demon's ribs. Medic, Captain Ray's sharp command snapped Marin from her trance. Harold dropped the datapad and hurried to Zhao, who winced as he rose, clutching his side. A fragment, perhaps stray bone or shattered carapace, had nicked his ribs. Dunn knelt to assist. Marin closed the distance to Kale. He met her halfway, gaze distant, as if replaying the attack in his mind. Status report, Marin managed, voice hoarse. Kale flexed his gloved fingers, flinging off the last drips of ichor. Hookall immobilized instantly by nanite destabilization. Neural feedback loop caused systemic failure. Approximately, he paused, eyes flicking to the jagged remains of spinal cord, 36 fatal severances. Blood loss. Contained. By clot protocol. Marin blinked. You contained its blood loss. Her scientific mind reeled. Only a handful of organisms could self-seal wounds that large, and none so massive. It's what I do, he said flatly. He recoiled as Harold and Dunn attended to Zhao. Marin touched her wrist console, recording every word. She needed data morphology, kill dynamics, nanite integration. But more than that, she craved understanding of Kale himself, the living weapon at her side. Reyes approached, face grim beneath the helmet light. We need samples, bone fragments, spine segments, tissue biopsies. Harold, Zhao assist Marin. Dunn, set up the biocontainment module. Kale, scan the perimeter for additional threats. His gaze lingered on Kale with something like wary respect. And thanks. Kale nodded, turning away. He strode toward the canyon rim, handing the digital scanner to Marin as he passed. Marin activated the scanner, probing the swirling heat mists. The display flickered, dozens of faint readings. Footsteps not all three-toed like the Hookall S. Smaller, quicker. Pack dynamics. She frowned. Kale, she called. He paused, scanning the ground with uncanny precision. What are these? She tapped the scanner. Smaller signatures, moving fast. He didn't answer immediately. The wind caught his cloak, fluttering behind him like a dark wing. At last he spoke. Kedra hounds, juvenile pack, opportunistic scavengers, won't attack alone, but in numbers dangerous. Marin felt a chill. How many? He closed his eyes, inhaled sharply. 17, some with enhanced sensory glands. They'll circulate, waiting for carcass scraps. He turned back toward her, voice low. We have 5 minutes before they converge. Reyes barked orders. Marin and Harold knelt beside the carcass, suiting up in hazard gloves and visors. Dunn deployed the containment dome, its force field humming to life over the shattered skull. Zhao, grimacing with pain, passed Marin a reinforced scalpel and a cluster of cryogenic sample vials. Marin inhaled deeply, steeling herself. The Hookall-S skull was thicker than meteorite crust. Her scalpel bounced against the keratinous layer. She swallowed, recalling her training. She slid the vibroblade from her belt, the humming edge singing as she pressed it into the bone. Sparks flew, the smell of ozone and burning protein caught in her throat. She worked methodically, carving out a hunk of carapace spiked with glowing lamellae. Behind her, Harold extracted muscle fibers and cartilage samples, clamping each in cryoseal tubes. Zhao monitored their vitals, voice tight but steady as he issued pain meds to himself. Above them, the red sky darkened as clouds gathered. Lightning flickered in the distance. The first howl ripped through the canyon, furious, primal. Marin froze. Harold looked up from her work, eyes wide. The Kedra hounds had arrived. A dozen six-legged creatures emerged from the shadows, sleek, jet-black forms with bioluminescent white stripes that traced their spines. Their mandibles clicked, sensory tendrils quivered. They fanned out, encircling the corpses, pawing at the ground. Dunn raised her rifle. 2 o'clock. Move it. Kale leapt atop a nearby rock, scanning again. They'll test for weaknesses. Keep them in the dome. Reyes activated the force field dome's sonic deterrence. A low-frequency pulse vibrated. Through the air, the hounds recoiled, fur bristling, but they regrouped, snarling, and one darted forward, teeth glinting. Maren reflexively waved her arm. Back, she stumbled, twisting her ankle in the loose scree. Harold caught her, pressing a hand to her arm. "Medic, we need your help," Zhao shouted. "They're bypassing the field. The dome's failing." A crackle, then a shudder as the force field flickered. One hound slipped inside. Leaping toward Zhao, Dunn fired her rifle. The stun bolt struck the beast's flank, but it snarled through the pain and snapped at his leg. Kale dropped from the rock in a blur. He caught the hound's muzzle between palms, slamming it into the ground with bone-shattering force. The creature collapsed, twitching. A second hound lunged. Kale spun, delivering a spinning elbow that fractured its skull like ceramic. Maren watched in horrified fascination. She felt the world slow again as Kale moved lethal, efficient down to more predators before they even registered his presence. Each hit was precise, each motion savagely artful. Reyes barked, "Pull back to the shuttle." Now, Maren shook off Harold's support and sprinted for the shuttle's dust-shielded cargo bay, cursing in 3 languages as her ankle protested. Behind her, explosions of concussive charges went off, Dunn detonating microcharges to repel the remaining hounds. The force field dome collapsed in a shower of sparks. Maren vaulted into the shuttle, heart pounding. Inside, the cargo bay's rear door hissed shut. The team piled in, Harold carrying tissue samples, Zhao limping, Dunn checking ammo. Kale was last in, scanning the horizon. As the shuttle lifted, Maren staggered to the viewport. The canyon floor receded, but the hounds remained circling. The corpse like morbid scavengers, a dozen pale eyes caught the shuttle's light. Then they scattered back into the red mists. Maren slumped against the wall, adrenaline draining. Harold propped an ice pack beneath her ankle. Zara's problem solvers. The shuttle shuddered as it leveled off. Reyes exhaled audibly. Status? Harold passed the vial cluster to Maren. Tissue integrity excellent. Carapace sample viable for nanite composition analysis. No casualties, just minor injuries. Maren flicked through her scans. But observation, the Cadra hounds were attracted within 5 minutes. They breach standard sonic deterrence within 3 cycles. They adapt. Becomes a threat if we stay any longer. Kale crossed to stand beside her, voice low. Those hounds will return in greater numbers. They're pack hunters. They'll exploit the nanite decay in the corpse. They'll mutate faster. Maren's breath caught. Mutate. Create new threats. He nodded. We cannot leave the carcass. Extraction team will contain before day's end, or the canyon is lost. Reyes pressed his lips together. Maren, you wanted data. We got more than we bargained for. He turned to the pilot. Set waypoint for EVX Site Delta. We move before the next cycle. Maren exchanged a glance with Kale. She wanted to push deeper. There were so many mysteries in those spines. In the Hookal's neural feedback, but she also respected Kel's warning. The planet was a crucible, and they had barely survived its first test. As the shuttle sped across the blood-red dunes, Maren reviewed her recordings. She had footage of Kel's transformation, biometric logs, thermal overlays of the carcass, Cadra movement patterns. The implications were staggering both for human enhancement and planetary biosafety. But she also felt a new weight pressing on her, the cost of tampering with life. On such a scale, the lines between predator and prey, weapon and soldier, had already begun to blur. She turned to Kale, who reclined on a stasis couch. Eyes closed, Harold dozed near the samples. Zhao monitored calm frequencies. Only Dunn remained alert. Watching the viewport, Maren ventured gently. Can you tell me more about your enhancements? The nanites, are they stable? He opened his eyes, their gray depths like storm clouds roiling with inner lightning. Stable for now, he replied. But every system has a failure mode. If the backbone array destabilizes, well, you don't want to know. Maren swallowed. I do. He looked at her, studying her with a predator's curiosity. In 0592, I survived an orbital crash. I was dying. Those nanites saved, Miri wrote. My biology, integrated with my nervous system. Since then, I've outlived everyone I ever cared about. He fell silent. The shuttle hummed around them, each vibration a reminder that they hurtled through the void above a world still hungry for prey. Marin's voice was soft. You don't have to face this alone. He gave her a slow, sad smile. I never have. And in that moment, Marin realized that the true hunt had only begun, not for the beasts of Zyron 9, but for the humanity buried deep within its deadliest weapon. The red mists outside the viewport seemed to swirl in anticipation. Chapter 2 of their story was written in blood and bone, and the next page would demand more than courage. It would demand sacrifice. The orbital laboratory hung like a beacon against the blackness of space, its array of solar sails and sensor pods glinting in the twin sun's glare. Inside, Dr. Marin Solari moved between consoles and containment lockers with breathless urgency. She had just 60 standard hours before the shuttle returned to Zyron 9's surface to retrieve the remaining Leviathan Hukal samples, and before Command decided Kel's enhancements were too dangerous to keep in the field. The lab's central holotable displayed three-dimensional reconstructions of the Carapace fragments, muscle fibers, and the strange, oily blood. Marin tapped a datapad, isolating the fluid's spectral lines. The Hukal ichor was laced with crystalline proteins nanometer-scale prisms that refracted infrared light into discrete bands. Beneath the microscope, Marin watched a droplet of blood and something moved inside it. Report, she ordered. Technician Hales hovered at her shoulder, eyes wide. The prisms aren't inert, Hales said, voice trembling. They're self-assembling. They form lattice structures around organic molecules almost like they're encoding genetic data. Marin's pulse spiked. Encoding genetic data? You mean, it's a form of biological memory? Exactly. Hales replied. It's as if the Hukal evolved to carry its own genome in crystalline form, perhaps to survive extreme conditions. But more striking, some of these lattices are matching up with the nanite signatures in subject Kel's blood. Marin whirled. Run a comparative analysis. Now, Hales tapped commands on the holotable. Two molecular models intertwined. Kel's human nanites and the alien protein lattices. Where they overlapped, the silvery filaments of Kel's augmentation interwove with the glowing prisms of Hukal blood. They're resonating at the same frequency, Hales said, voice barely audible. The prism structures are synchronizing with the control loops of the nanites. It's bonding. Marin felt a chill. Bonding how? Further tests indicate the nanites are rewriting their own firmware to incorporate the protein code. The process is gradual, but irreversible. Silence fell. Marin stared at the swirling hologram. The implications were staggering. The Hukal biocrystals were integrating into Kel's augmentations, rewriting his enhancements with alien code. If unchecked, the man who had torn a Leviathan in half might mutate into something beyond human and beyond. Control. She pushed aside the holoprojector and entered a secure corridor. At its end lay Kel's private quarters, more a medical pod than a room. The chamber's airlock hissed. Inside, Kale sat on a narrow bench, head bowed as he recalibrated the gauntlets that had torn the Hukal skull. He looked up at her. Entrance, face unreadable. Results, she swallowed. It's worse than we thought. Marin gestured for him to follow. Come to the genomic lab. He stood, armor plates clicking softly. As he walked, Marin noticed the faint glow beneath his skin and ethereal shimmer at the junctions of his veins and the implant ports along his spine. In the lab, Hales brought up the comparative scan. Kale stepped closer, eyes fixed on the dancing prisms. Those lattices, Kale said quietly, are more than memory. They're directive. I've felt it when I touched that beast. I felt a pulse. Like a call. Marin nodded. The Hukal blood is instructing your nanites to replicate its architecture. We estimate you have 2, maybe 3 standard days before it reaches a critical threshold. Kale clenched his fists. And then, you'll lose yourself, she said softly. Your neural integration will be overwritten. You'll become something else. He shook his head. Not acceptable. Marin drew in a shaky breath. There is one option. We develop a targeted counteragent to an antiviral nanite signaler that can lock your firmware loops. Freeze them in their current state. But it's experimental. I need live blood samples from both you and the hook owl. Kale hesitated. You mean draw more of my blood? I'm unstable. The risk of triggering a feedback cascade is high. I know, she said. But if we don't act, you become an alien hybrid entirely. Worse, you might become a vector for that same bionanite symbiosis in others. He closed his eyes. A moment later, he exhaled. Do it. Maren prepared the extraction station, a biocontainment booth flanked by cryogenic chambers. Hales monitored the temperature controls, while a medical android, ARIA-3, sterilized electrodes and vials. Maren fitted Kale with a restraint harness and clipped the monitoring leads to his neck and forearm ports. Administer local sedative, she instructed. Minimal dosage, just enough to steady the hand. Kale nodded, jaw tight. His breathing slowed as ARIA-3 inserted a microcatheter into the vein at his forearm port. The nanite-enhanced blood streamed into a sealed vial lined with electromagnetic stabilizers. Maren watched the analyzer. The sample maintained its integrity for 3 minutes, long enough. They transferred the vial to the cryo chamber. Kale winced but remained still as Hales repeated the process on a shard of the hook owl's carapace. A laser cutter heated the fragment to melt away trace contaminants. Then ARIA-3 skimmed the blood residue, sealing it in a second vial. There. Ready, Hales said. Maren took both vials. She keyed a sequence into her console. A tiny vial in a third chamber began glowing a dance of blue-green photons. As the counteragent synthesized in real time, a swarm of neutralizing nanites designed to seek out the resonant frequency of the alien prisms and lock them inert. We inject simultaneously, Maren said, turning to Kale. If the agent works, it stops the rewrite cycle. But there's a 50-50 chance your nanites reject it. Your system could crash. Kale gave a slow nod. I trust you. She injected the agent into a separate port on his arm. Kel's eyes fluttered as the light beneath his skin brightened, then pulsed in strange patterns. Maren held her breath on the holo-display. The intertwined nanite and prism models shuddered, then froze. The live skin showed the lattices dimming, the nanite firmware loops locking in place. Maren exhaled. It's stabilizing. Kale sagged, his armor plating disengaging as he slumped against the harness. Hales rushed forward. Vitals are good. Neurological scans are normal. Maren closed her eyes in relief after long moments. Kale opened his eyes, focusing on her with a tired smile. Thank you. She helped him sit up. There's more work to do. Variants might slip through, but we've bought time. Enough for Chapter 4. He exhaled, gaze drifting to the holotable where the frozen models floated silently. Then let's write it carefully. Outside, the laboratory's observation window looked out on the swirling red planet below. Far beneath the orbital station, Zyron 9's canyons lay blanketed in storm and shadow. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time, Maren felt they might steer its course. The secrets in the blood were vast and dangerous, but now, at least, they had the keys to unlock them. The shuttle's engines hummed a restless lullaby as it broke through Zyron 9's turbulent atmosphere. Dr. Maren Solari sat strapped into her observation couch, eyes glued to the viewport. Below, the jagged canyons unfurled in a tapestry of red dust and obsidian shadows. It had been 3 standard days since Kel's stabilization, a sliver of time, in which he'd been ferried to the orbital lab, cleansed of most alien nanite contagion, and deemed fit only for supervised field work. Now they were returning, charged with retrieving the last carcass fragments of the Leviathan Hukal and sealing the site. Before the Cadra hounds mutated further, Captain Reyes' voice crackled over the comm. Approaching insertion point, ETA 6 minutes. Prep for rapid deployment. Maren glanced at Kale, who sat stoically across the cabin, his left forearm still bandaged where the counteragent had been administered. The faint glow beneath his skin had faded to a ghostly hum. His gaze remained fixed on the planet, storm cloud gray eyes reflecting the canyon depths. She felt a pang of guilt. He had volunteered for the injection, imperiling himself to save the mission, and yet command still viewed him with suspicion, a living weapon needing containment as much as protection. The shuttle shuddered as it entered the red mists. Harold and Zhao readied the biocontainment pods. Dunn ran systems checks on pulse, rifles, and microcharges. Marin strapped herself into the cargo bay's comm station. Fingers poised over the holo controls. "Stand by for touchdown," the pilot intoned. The ground ripped toward them in a blur of rust and black. The shuttle skids gouged the canyon floor. Dust billowed until the engines throttled down. The aft hatch clanged open. A wall of heat and ionized particles rushed in, setting their comm links crackling. Reyes led the descent. "Move out 2 minutes on the clock before the hounds converge." They formed a tight unit. For in-field armor, Marin and Kale in specialized hazmat suits with additional sensor rays. The wounded Karapachi containment pod, its reinforced bulk still strapped. To the shuttle's ramp awaited their careful hands. Marin tapped her wrist console. Environmental readings stable, no seismic shifts. But thermal scans show multiple moving signatures, likely scavengers. Kale raised an electronic glove. "They're not hounds, these are new. We might be too late." She frowned. "New variants," he nodded. "Faster, leaner, symbiotic with nanite degradation proteins. They'll breach standard defenses in under 2 minutes. Reyes barked. "Plan B, secure the pod first, then pull back to extraction. No deviation." Marin swallowed. "Understood." They advanced in rapid sprint, weapons ready. The shuttle's flickering lights swept the canyon walls, revealing fractured rock spires and veins of blue plasma crystal. The remains of the first Leviathan lay a few 100 meters ahead, partially covered by a translucent force field dome. Its power cells drained. Protocols expired. Dunn and Zhao unstrapped the pod. It was a bulky cylinder of durasteel, its interior lined with biofoam cushioning. Marin keyed the seal sequence. 1, 2, 3. Valves hissed as the dome's force field solidified around the carcass. Harold began connecting the pods, grappling hooks to the dome's reinforced frame. A distant shriek tore through the air, a chorus of piercing howls, magnified by the canyon echoes. Marin's heart pounded. Kale lifted a hand, scanning with his glove. 15 signatures coming from the south ridge. Reyes grimaced. "Time's up. We move now." They hefted the pod's frame. Marin felt its weight, half of the Leviathan's mass, suspended helplessly above the sands. Every step was a battle against her own exhaustion, but they made progress along the winding path back to the shuttle. Behind them, for a heartbeat, all was still. Then the red mists erupted. Dozens of new Cadra variants leapt from rock ledges, sinewy forms with crystalline prongs growing from their spines, eyes lit by nanite fire. They moved in perfect pack formation, coordinating with silent, intelligence-driven precision. Harold fired a pulse rifle. Bolts crackled harmlessly off chitinous hide. Dunn lobbed flash charges. Bright pulses stunned a few before their biocrystals regenerated. Zhao engaged vented sonic grenades. An ear-splitting cacophony that slowed to but more emerged, circling like a hunting wraith. Marin's comm flared. "They're adapting." The sonic grenades. Kale dropped to one knee, pressing his gloved palm to the ground and closing his eyes. Marin watched in horrified fascination as he drew a low, humming chant through his teeth, something ancient, harmonic. The air around him rippled. A tendril of energy pulsed from his palms into the rock, the vibrations setting the crystals in the creature's spines to oscillate at a counter-frequency. The hounds faltered, bodies shuddering as their biocrystals sang in dissonance. Several collapsed, then staggered to their feet, dazed. Seizing the moment, Reyes shouted, "Move!" Now, they surged forward, dragging the pod over loose scree. Kale fell back into formation, panting from the effort of his resonance. Marin risked a glance at his forearm. The injection site had healed, but faint circuit-like scars still glowed beneath the skin. They reached the shuttle as the first wave of variants recoiled, at the temporal distortions still unwinding through the canyon. Harold and Zhao hauled the pod inside. Dunn slammed the hatch. The shuttle's rear doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss. Reyes leapt into the cockpit. Engines full throttle. The canyon floor dropped away as the shuttle ascended. The variants howled up at them, claws scratching at the cargo bay windows before tumbling back into the dust. The mist swallowed their forms. Then they were gone. Inside the cabin, silence reigned. Marin slid down to the deck, hands shaking. The pod thumped against the bulkhead as it locked into place. Harold shut the containment latches, her gloves. Trembling, Kale sank onto a stasis couch, face pale. I don't know how long I can hold that resonance, he rasped. Each time, it drains me. Marin knelt beside him, placing a hand on his arm. You did more than you knew. We have everything we need now. Carapace, muscle tissue, blood samples. We can reverse engineer the HFY biocrystals, create a countermeasure for the planet's life cycle. Kel's eyes met hers, fatigue and relief warring within them. And me? Once command examines the samples, they'll decide whether I'm weapon or patient. Marin's throat tightened. I've drafted a full report arguing for your protection as a living research subject, not a test subject. Admiral Forsyth agreed to review it, but she paused, searching for the right words. It depends on what they find in the data. He offered a crooked smile. Then let's hope they find a friend, not a threat. As the shuttle cleared Xiron 9's red haze, Marin entered the secure comlink to Admiral Forsyth's flagship. The Admiral's stern face appeared on the holoscreen, framed by the cold steel of the council chamber. Dr. Solari, Forsyth began, voice formal. Report status. Marin swallowed past the lump in her throat. Leviathan Hokal samples secured. Carapace and tissue viability at 92%. Identified a rapid symbiosis between Kedra hound variants and Hokal biocrystals posing ecosystem collapse risk. Subject Kel's nanoaugmentation stabilized and protected via counteragent. No casualties. Forsyth's expression flickered surprise, relief, calculation. And the subject himself, Marin's pulse thundered. I recommend granting him continued field status under controlled study. His unique physiology is the key to understanding and potentially immunizing future explorers against Xiron 9's biosphere. The Admiral's gaze sharpened. You place great faith in this Gale. He is a weapon created by a clandestine program. His existence breaches multiple treaties. Marin squared her shoulders. He's also the reason our team lived through 2 attempts on our lives. Without him, we'd be feeding the dust storms. Forsyth's holoscreen shimmered. A brief pause. Very well. I will forward your recommendation to the Council. Pending their approval, Dr. Solari, you are cleared to continue provided subject Kale remains under both your supervision and that of the Medical Research Division. Understood. Marin exhaled. Understood, Admiral. Thank you. The hololink closed. Kale watched her, eyes wary. She offered a tentative smile. It's a start. Days later, aboard the Orbital Lab's observation deck, Marin watched the newly synthesized counteragents being loaded into remote dispersal drones, bound for Xiron 9's surface. Below, the crimson landscape stretched unbroken beauty, and terror interwoven in its dancing dust storms. Kale approached, carrying 2 steaming cups of synth coffee. He handed her one. She accepted it with a nod of thanks. You did well, he said quietly, voice soft as the lab's hum. For a scientist, you make a good commander. She laughed, a brief, bright sound amid the sterile environment. I had a good teacher. He hesitated, then seated himself beside her. They watched the drones drift through the station's hangar bay, destined to seed the planet with biochemical safeguards that would protect future expeditions from the aberrant parasites. You know, Marin ventured. Some say the Hokal evolved those biocrystals to preserve its species. In a harsh world, a genetic memory in stone. Maybe Xiron 9's true apex predator is not the hunter, but the codes it carries. Kale leaned back, eyes never leaving the viewport. Or maybe it's the bond between hunter and weapon when both learn to trust each other instead of the weapons they wield. Marin met his gaze, feeling both hope and uncertainty blossom within her. What will you do now? He turned a hand over the rim of his cup, examining the faint scar where the counteragent had been injected. I don't know. The Council might reassign me, or they might decommission me. She placed a hand over his. I'll fight for you. You're more than your enhancements. A chime echoed through the deck's speakers. Alarms lit in the control panels. Marin's comm crystal pulsed with urgent red light. She snatched it up. Marin Solari. Dr. Solari. Hales's panicked voice crackled. We're detecting a massive seismic rupture near the containment drone's Xiron 9's crust is fracturing. Storm patterns escalating beyond predicted thresholds. Marin's blood ran cold. How soon? Minutes. Hales replied, the planets. Reacting to the biocrystal dispersal, we may have triggered a chain reaction. Kale rose, dropping his cup. We go down there. Marin swallowed. We have to. If the planet's biosphere is destabilizing. She didn't finish. Kale already had one hand on her arm, steel in his gaze. Then this hunt, it's not over. They rushed toward the command elevator, footsteps echoing on the metal grating. Outside, the solar sails trembled as the station rocked. Marin's mind raced every hypothesis. Every model had failed to predict this. The true apex predator, it seemed, was the unpredictable fury of a living world. As the elevator doors slid shut, Marin glanced at Kale, her ally, her weapon, her friend. The future of Zyron 9 and perhaps all mankind's ventures into the wild, unknown, depended on their next move. And so, the final hunt began.